Okay. Good evening, everyone in the room this evening, and also those of you watching at home to celebrate day one of Mental Health Awareness Week, or if you're catching it up on Catch Up, YouTube, how do we post these things later, then a bit later the party, but you are welcome anyway. This is my first panel that I've chaired at the Conduit. I've done many a panel, but my first one here, so go gentle on me. Because it's absolutely what you should not do is find yourself a menopausal woman, give her a couple of hours notice, 3 people she thinks she's never met before but has met one before, sorry about that, and then put them on recording. But anyway, here we are, and it's not even my specialist subject, or so I thought. So we are going to kick off, and the format will be, I'm going to be asking these guys some questions. And we're going to be bouncing off each other, I hope. I also hope they're going to throw the odd question to you guys. So let that be a small warning that if you don't have questions ready to come to our panel, they're going to fill in the silence with questions back to you. And that's the way we like to run things here. So if you do have a burning question, great. If you don't, get one ready. Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about, well, we're given a choice, aren't we, on the brief? Play or purpose, which is most important. Does that mean, panel, that we need to have a vote at the end and have an outcome? What do we think?
I think let's go with the vote.
Yeah? Okay.
Let's see what happens.
What do you think, Rob?
I'm with you. I think a vote at the end.
Okay. So, again, another brief for our audience. At the end, we're going to ask you to choose one or the other. There are no shades of grey at the end of this Conduit event. We're going to ask you to say which one you believe to be most important to you. Doesn't matter about what anybody else thinks, but to you. We ready to go? Okay. So, I've got a clear view on which I think is most important. And that's probably how I've run my life. Imperfectly, obviously, most of us do. But I'm going to go each of you in turn, and I'm going to start with Michelle. You didn't want me to start with you, did you?
I am delighted that you are starting with me. I cannot wait.
So, Michelle gets to go first with a shameless plug. So, you've had the official introductions. I want to know, who are you in your words, and why are you here this evening?
Well, I'm Michelle, and I'm lots of things in life. I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I'm a social entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur, just depends how you want to describe it really. I'm an ambassador for Mental Health First Aid England, I'm an author. I have to do that. They're at the back.
Signed copies are available.
But I guess everything that I do now in life comes under a really clear mission. Although I do lots of things, and I love doing lots of things, but sometimes it's not helpful to me or my mental health that I love doing lots of things. But I'm a work in progress. But my mission is to make mental health an everyday conversation. And that came out of my own personal experience of having burnout, and at the time an undiagnosed diagnosis of depression and anxiety, and I guess what kind of drove that big moment of almost changing what my mission was. At that moment in time, I was leading a social enterprise, a purpose-led business called Liberty, which is all about young people. I was 16 years into that, but I had a big burnout moment. And I think it is pertinent to purpose and play. I think there are lots of lessons that I can take from that. Although until this panel, I wouldn't have put, oh, well, it was about purpose and play. I had too much of one thing and not enough of the other, or vice versa. So it's going to be an interesting debate. But, you know, what drove me into this new space was a stigmatizing comment when someone said to me, you know what, it's a bit awkward when you talk to the business about your mental health, Michelle. And look, lots of things happened beyond them, but at that moment it was crushing and silencing, and I stopped talking about my mental health. And all the way on the other side, when I did start talking about my mental health, I discovered, well, firstly, I thought it was not awkward. So I was like, it's not awkward, it's not awkward. And then I had this moment of realization that actually it probably is awkward. It's awkward most times I say out loud, I feel a bit awkward now, yeah, because I don't know what you're thinking. That moment when I either tell you about my mental health or I ask you about yours.
That might be a good question for you to ask the audience when we turn the table.
Absolutely. So all of that drives what I do now.
And that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Rob, what about you? Who's the real Rob and why are you here?
Well, it's interesting. Your opening there was a bit like the openings to my keynotes. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a DJ, I'm a cyclist. We're all made up of many different little I's that make up our big identity. And one of mine is that I'm bipolar. I experience bipolar disorder, which is a mental illness that is characterized by extremes of mood. And I'm 50 now. When I was 30, I was diagnosed. I see the signs going back through my 20s. When I was 31, at a time where I'd lost hope and I felt everything was futile, I tried to end my life. I wanted it to be over. Now, with the love of close friends and family, I learned to manage my condition over the years, but I did so very much under the radar because of the stigma of mental ill health. And when I first shared my story 5 years ago, the reaction to it changed my life because I was getting so many people sharing their stories back because I'd created this safe space to do so. And that sent me on this mission to find my purpose to help inspire the creation of mentally healthy workplaces. Now, prior to that, I was an accountant and I was a headhunter and a recruitment consultant. I don't know if the two are connected to my mental illness, maybe. But for the last 5 years, I've been living with a strong sense of purpose. And this topic is really interesting because in some respects, that's brilliant for my mental health, and we'll talk more about it. In other respects, the drive that comes with is detrimental to my well-being. And bringing play in to mitigate against that is important. So I think this is going to be a good discussion, but that's me.
That's an interesting choice of words, to play to mitigate purpose. Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Well, last but not least.
I thought going last would be easier, but I don't think it is. More of what they said. Really important topic to me personally. And I remember sitting with Freddie probably about 7 months ago upstairs when we first hatched this idea of this purpose play. And at that point, I was just a bit annoyed because everyone was talking about purpose a lot. And I was like, but what about play? We've got to have more play. And I probably say that from a personal perspective because I am a researcher as well as a consultant and working with businesses. And so I come from the academic background and I've always known about the importance of purpose, but I've also known about the massive risk that comes with it. Because burnout was first identified in people in the caring professions. Because when you're caring for people and you're on the front line, well, actually, I need to keep going because this is life or death. There's a comment we often use in PR, and we go, it's PR, not ER. And if you're in ER, no, it's ER. You've got to do the extra hours. This is life or death. So I think I've always been aware of that risk. I've also been aware of that risk in myself, similar to Michelle. My own tendency to get a bit wrapped up in my own work led to my own mental health challenges and my own crisis. And so I've been aware of that, and I struggle to put enough play into my life. Equally, I know the research around play and why that's so important. And so I'm still sitting on the fence, and I'm here tonight in the hope that you guys are going to help me make a decision, and you guys are going to help me make a decision about which is more interesting and more important.
Thank you. And thank you for being the person who put with Freddie, of course, purpose and play on the agenda together. Because, I certainly had not had that thought before. Can I ask our audience, how many of you have thought about that as a potential mitigator, compromise of each other? Hi. You had? Yeah. And one more over there? 2, 3, 4. Okay. They're a bit further ahead than us than they're thinking. Okay. I hope you, like me, are blown away with the depth of stories and the openness with which these guys are already sharing. I have to say I feel really humbled to be sat here chairing you, and thank you, because I know there's more to come. So to explore the topic a bit further, I'd like to, I guess, find something you can all spar off, right? So for each of you, when did you first discover purpose being an important thing? Because I don't want us to talk about what could be mitigating without actually focusing on the thing that is so important to so many people and to all of us, right? So the play in isolation isn't what we're here to talk about. Let's talk about purpose. So whoever wants to go first, just tell me that first pang of that, when it hit you like a lightning bolt, that this is about purpose, but in a positive way. Let's do the positive side first.
Happy to go. So, as I mentioned, when I shared my story, and I had friends, excuse me, telling me their stories back. I remember, vividly, a mate from the cycling club said to me, a few years ago, I tried to end my life, and I've never told anyone about this. And I'm like, now you've told me, and we can check in with each other, and we do. When I had business contacts that I was fearful of disclosing my condition to, telling me that they'd experienced a mental health challenge, or their partner had, or their wives had, their husbands. And I just started to realize that this is a real big deal. And I'm like, it was like a light bulb moment for me. I need to use whatever skills I've got, whatever experience I've got to try and make a difference. And so my purpose was ignited from my adversity, but from sharing my story and seeing that there's a problem out there that we need to address, which is the stigma of mental illness. Now, there's a lot of great people working on this, and I then looked for a way to try and contribute to that mission to improve our workplaces, improve our societies.
Okay, so for you, that triggered the purpose. What about either of you ladies? Because I think there was a different journey to purpose around this space.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it came to me with anger, if I'm really honest. So my burnout breakdown moment was about 12 years ago. And it was, as I say, it was overworking. In hindsight, I can look back and go, well, that's because my values didn't really align with the job I was doing. I was working in fashion at the time, and I believed we shouldn't judge people on what they wear, and there was this conflict. But when I started to research what I do now, which I do believe is a purpose-driven business, I was doing it purely for self-interest. I just wanted to know how I had ended up with an anxiety and depression diagnosis, and how someone like me, who had always been so resilient, could end up like that. And it was when I started to read more around psychology and positive psychology and all this stuff about how my brain was working and how I could have looked after myself better. And as I was reading it, I was just becoming angry that I'd gone through all my education and no one had taught me this stuff. And all this topic of mental health had always been a bit, don't talk about that in public, Charlotte. And so it became this anger that there was this information that could help every single person in the world to enjoy their life more and have a better quality of life. And you had to go out and seek it by reading specific books. And it was, I need to get that information to people, because people shouldn't have to do this for themselves, and they shouldn't have to get to the point I got to find out that stuff. So that was kind of how and I think it was probably either The Happiness Advantage or Finding Peace in a Frantic World. They were the two pivotal books for me that were like, oh my gosh, this makes sense, because it had a lot of neuroscience, and I like to know how the brain works. So those are the moments.
I have no idea if those two books are on the Conduit book list, but Freddie, if somebody's taken notes, we'll get them there. We love a good book recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, Finding Peace in a Frantic World by Danny Penman and Mark Williams, and The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker.
Michelle, you're nodding. Have you read these two?
The first one, in lockdown one. In lockdown one, I was one of those people, actually, who trained to become a mindfulness-based cognitive therapist. And that's Danny's book. Danny and Mark are the advocates of that. So I know it well. Shall I talk about
I was just going to say, so Livity was around, this was 20 odd years ago. So were you one of these people always clear on purpose? Because I think you were a bit of an early adopter from my knowledge of you.
Well, I mean, this has prompted a massive moment of reflection, this question. So I'm really grateful that Rob and Charlotte gave me the time to think about it. But it means that I have really gone back to 2001, probably the year 2000, when Sam and I were writing our business plan. Also, because I'm having a massive reflection, and it's been quite a big day, and we were talking about Mental Health Awareness Week. It's a big week, and I kind of haven't stopped, and this feels like the first time I've stopped. I might get emotional tonight, so I'm just going to say that out loud, but just be with me. I'll be okay, all right? So in 2000, I met Sam. We were both kind of broadly in marketing, and we had this idea to set up a youth marketing agency, but that was different. A youth marketing agency that would save the world. That was the ambition. There was not the word purpose in our business plan, but what I do remember, we would have been using the word making a difference and being better, and definitely a few times we said save the world. But what was in there was, and to have fun along the way. So it's really interesting to me. Actually, we didn't really start with purpose in many ways. Yes, there was a big ambition, but we didn't really know what that purpose was. But the purpose became clear very, very quickly. So to be that youth marketing agency, our methodology was to go out and talk to young people and involve them in the creation of the solutions that we were coming up with for our clients. And what happened quite quickly was, as well as going out, those same young people started to come in to our office and share our office space. And a lot of them were coming in during the daytime. And if they hadn't been coming into ours, they would have been doing I don't know what, but not going to school. And that is where not only, I'm going to say the word, commercially, we started to have an even better edge on our competitors because we were sharing our space with young people. We were getting these insights just from sitting next to someone who was probably, most of them were incredibly different to me. But also that sense of purpose was really starting to come through right from the get-go. And it was just enormous fun. It was enormous fun. And I'm happy to talk about it a bit more, but when I burnt out in 2016 and had depression and anxiety that went into 2017 and that hung around for quite some time, one of the things that I realised, I was physically and mentally burnt out, but I realised that my purpose and passion for liberty had utterly burnt out. But also, the other reflection is it was no longer fun. And that might be, if I was really put on the spot here, maybe that it was no longer fun. That was probably the worst part.
Oh, thank you. So do we think purpose is one of these things you have or you don't have? Or is it one of these things you can have in different measures? You can have more than one? Do these things change? Are we born with a purpose? We just haven't found it, and it's a bit like, I don't know, believing in a soulmate. I mean, what are our takes on, the form of purpose and the positivity? Come on, I don't want us to be, I know this is Mental Health Awareness Week, but purpose can be as big a driver on positive mental health as it can also potentially be a danger, which we'll come on to. So, yeah, tell me what you think about that. Go on, Rob, I can see you're ready.
Always itching to pick the microphone up. So we all need meaningful activity in our lives to thrive. It's one of the fundamental drivers of our well-being. Now, if we're fortunate, like many in this room are, we will find that sense of purpose or that sense of meaningful activity in what we do to earn a living. For years I didn't, and so I would look elsewhere, whether it was sporting activities or hobbies, to find a sense of meaning. But we need that to thrive. So if we have a strong sense of purpose, and if we're fortunate enough to have that from our workplace, then that is one of the contributing factors to positive mental well-being. And we all exist on a continuum, and if we sleep poorly, that can take us down. If we have a strong sense of purpose, that can pick us up. If we exercise and get out into nature, connect with others, all of these things are components of our well-being. But I don't think we can fundamentally thrive without meaningful activity. Now, we don't have to get that from the workplace, and many don't, and we're lucky if we do. But we do need to find meaning from somewhere, and that's why sporting clubs, hobbies, book clubs, whatever it might be, can give us that meaning. But I think, some special challenges and great things happen when we get that professionally.
Are those things the purpose, or the delivery of the purpose being having fun, the balancing from the tough bits? I guess that for me is the interesting question. So I think about what you said about sport clubs and book clubs. I don't know, Charlotte, you brought this purpose or play into one sentence. What do you think?
I think we can take the word purpose too seriously. I suggest that everyone in this room has a purpose. They all got out of bed this morning, and all the people watching online, they all have a reason.
You guys agree? You all got a purpose?
Okay. So for some of you, and there's a few faces I know in the room, that might be being a great father. Being a great friend. That's as much of a purpose as anything else. Maybe your job, it's not the work itself that gives you that sense of meaning, but it's having an income which puts a roof over your children's head. Well, that's your purpose. So I think there's sometimes a bit of pressure, and I know, I spoke to a couple of people in the room about this before, about, I've got to have some life-changing purpose where I'm going to change the world and transform the world, and I'm really not a very good person because I'm not solving world peace. It's okay. You can be a nice person who walks down the street and smiles at people, holds the door open for other people. There's other ways that we can have purpose on micro levels. And if we can acknowledge that and recognize that and see how those moments are aligned with our values, then actually we are all contributing to a better society in our own way. And for me, that's what it's all about.
And that means I cannot resist. Michelle, was it you wrote a blog recently and you mentioned Maslow?
I reference it in the book, but I think it was Charlotte.
Was that you?
My
Okay,
article.
so we have to go there. Sorry.
That's
so,
okay. But what Charlotte said, definitely.
Okay. So let's just stick with that for a second. So the Maslow thing. This is not my specialist subject, but I do know the Maslow, the hierarchy of needs.
I'm trying to remember what I wrote about.
Sorry, you don't need to remember specifically. What I'm going to say is, I remember at certain points in my life, I left home when I was relatively young for nowadays, had my daughter when I was 23. I don't remember ever questioning what my purpose is. It was just a given. It was survival. And then, as on my own, and then as a parent. So they were my kind of unreferenced purpose. So whereas now, I mean, God, if every day, every minute has to. So is there some kind of intellectual graph alignment with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and therefore the need to change, redefine, build up, build down, ignore our purpose? What do we think?
Okay.
I don't mind going. I might not be about to answer your question, but
There's always one.
as also a menopausal woman, I just got to say it whilst it's in my head before I forget it.
That's allowed.
Yeah. I just want to say, this is so interesting. Sometimes I am building on what you said. Sometimes I feel really envious of people who don't have that deep, purposeful job where you can measure social impact. Let's describe it in that way. Because I see so many of those people being able to look after themselves better, finding, a really beautiful sense of purpose beyond their jobs. So I think it is really important to say, what does purpose look like? And what do you need it to look like for you at this moment in time? And of course, we're always changing and evolving. How will you feel about purpose and the work you do and the rest and the play and the chores? this time next year versus at this moment versus what it was like 5 years ago. It has, for me, I think it's ever changing, and I am often envious of people who have not chosen a path that I have, which I don't think will change, but I have to have a very clear sense of a purpose that feels like it can be measured by some kind of social impact. And let's not get on to the measurement of social impact, shall we? I'm sure that's like a whole other talk, right?
So do we think they've not chosen, or they've just not put it forefront of their mind and made a decision yet? What do you
Probably a bit of both, right?
What do you think, Rob?
Well, I think, again, if you're not getting that sense of meaning from what you do professionally, that person who's got that job, I think people will still need to look for meaning elsewhere. And as I say, whether that comes from their hobbies, because I think fundamentally we do need meaningful activity to thrive, to be human.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to go back to your point, Michelle, about, I guess, we'll always have it. You said that really clearly as I'm always going to have a strong sense of purpose. Can we talk a little bit about culture, I guess, in societal, at home, and maybe even work cultures, and get a few different angles on this? Is if we could describe what a really healthy culture might look like at work and at home to maximize the asset, which is purpose, what might that look like? So this is your think about your nirvana moment. Think about when you're coaching or talking to organizations, what does the perfect outcome look like when you go back 6 months or 12 months time and they've implemented everything and nailed it? It's going to be a family or a work. Who would like to go?
In terms of culture?
Yeah. What is a really nurturing culture of purpose in perspective and utilised as a real asset?
Again, I don't know I'm sorry if this doesn't exactly answer the question, but I know that something that I advocate and challenge leaders and businesses on a lot is, I will say, look, mental health, which is my mission, so that's what I'm going out and talking about. I believe that mental health as the broad topic should sit at the very centre of culture, leadership, and a business plan. I really do. And that the big watch out, we do see a greater emphasis and attention put on mental health in business, whether it's your policies, your processes, or your provisions. Great. But I still often feel a lack of leadership. Rob's doing a brilliant job there to bring leaders forward, because it's so important to hear those human stories and voices. But for me, if you can create a safe, trusted space in your business for people to be able to say when they're struggling, say how they're coping with life, say how they're truly feeling without fear, that drives a really healthy culture. But now we've got play, and I'm like, and now drop play in as well.
So just beautiful. So at the moment, as we've got the green box with the white cross on to keep everybody safe. We've got people, first aiders, who know how to stick bandages on or when to call 999. So what's missing?
I think it's psychological safety. And Google did a big project on what are the drivers of effective teams, and the number one is psychological safety. And psychological safety is a fear that you won't be punished or held back for speaking up, making a mistake, or putting forward an idea. And I think for a culture to be conducive to people finding a sense of purpose and meaningful work, psychological safety has to be at the heart of it. And that needs to come from leadership and transmit through the organisation. I think the other bit that we're hearing more around is the creation of good work, where people have autonomy to co-create their jobs and how they work, treating people like the adults that they've been through the pandemic. So I think we need that in combination with this psychological safety, and then people can find their meaning and purpose.
Thank you.
Well, I think, it's exactly as Rob said, there's so many elements when we're thinking about within the workplace. I think there's almost something more particularly interesting in what is culture, right? It's like saying to a fish, what's water?
You do know you're staying here all week while we answer this question.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to dive into that, and I might throw some ideas on that. But if you come back to the idea of a workplace that is promoting positive mental health or well-being or anything on that area, the Foresight Project in 2016 defined mental health or well-being with feeling good and functioning well. But that is really unique to each and every one of us. What is feeling good? And a culture that is for one person helping them thrive is going to be really debilitating for someone else. So I don't think we can put an overarching, this is the components it needs. It's quite unique to every business, the type of people, the demographics, the age, the location. But it is essentially about helping everyone in that workplace or that community to feel good, want to get out of bed, enjoy things, and function to the best of their ability based on what they want out of their existence. And having worked in Bali for a while and seeing what that means to those people in that country, it's very different to what we want here. And so I think there's a lot of cultural differences between countries, communities, and I think it's quite hard to put a one-size-fits-all on it.
So are we arguing at this point that we need to have play to be able to function well from a purposeful perspective? Is that where we're heading, do you think?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because to play, to be playful, that's quite a vulnerable notion in many ways, isn't it? Like the inner child. I am not a mental health professional, but we often hear about the inner child, and or something that I reference in my book. Sorry. Also, I'll try
What's
not
the title of that, Michelle?
Own Your Awkward. Sorry. But understanding the exhaustion funnel. I'm sure you know about this, don't you? And really simply, if we think that life is made up of, work, chores, rest, and play. If we just kind of created 4 buckets, but life is busy, that horrible word, busy, and we're rushing around and we're prioritizing many, many things, but probably not ourselves and our well-being and our mental health or our physical health. And often, what is the first thing to go? Play. What is the next thing to go? Rest. And then you're left with work and chores. Great. And for me, it's been a really useful tool. And I think it is about tools and frameworks and how to have conversations about how we're feeling, about how we're doing, about what we're doing in the workplace. How do we create a sense of, I got the 4 cornerstones of courageous conversations, and I think it's about confidence, I think it's a sense of capability, it's about communication skills, but the 4th one is compassion. And, compassion is within us. And if we can just tap into that first and foremost, and, can we bring that into this notion and idea of culture and conversations? We just need to be able to step into that psychologically safe space, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
But how do we do it? We need tools and techniques.
We do. And I'm just thinking back to organisations that I've worked in, from the small to the very large, thinking, there's a huge difference between a purpose-driven organisation or a purpose-driven person and a purpose-led person or purpose-led organisation. I mean, you guys both spend a lot of time with different types of businesses. I mean, what's your take on different ways purpose has been interpreted and used well or used badly?
I'm not going to answer that because I've just been reflecting on something else. that when we talk about play in an organisation, I think play... There's 2 sort of branches of it for me. There's play as a means of recovery from the stress and the workload and the toil, so fun. But I think there's also play as a component of the creative process and of performance. And I was fortunate enough to share a virtual stage with John Cleese, and he was talking about this study that was done for architects, and they looked at which architects were the most creative, and they looked at then why and what was the difference between the two groups. And one of the key components of the more creative architects were that they played more. So for me, there's this concept of, can we use play to facilitate performance? And because work seems to have got very transactional through the pandemic, from Zoom to Teams to agendas, can we use play to spark that creative and that performance process?
You've just blown my brains there, actually, because I've spent the last 20 years feeling guilty about all the time I spent in publishing and media, where, at one point went on a conference and, the strategy was to have fun, objectives were to get drunk and tactics were to drink beer, and we look back now, I look back to being inappropriate, but it's not at all, is it? Because media is an ideas business, right? Magazines are ideas businesses.
But the theme for Mental Health Awareness Week is loneliness and therefore connection. And actually, getting drunk in the pub is probably not of the day, but finding space to play and connect with colleagues and build those connections and relationships is super important, I think.
I wasn't advocating the last two. The strategy, the strategy being to have fun, right? So aligning with where you were, Michelle, around putting people at the heart and well-being at the heart of the organisation. If we adapted that to be the strategy of the organisation was to have fun within its chosen marketplace, could it be equally as successful, do you think?
I'm not sure that it needs necessarily. I'd want to debate, should it be at the centre? Should that be the number one? But I'm not saying no. I think I'd still go with mental health, but that's me. That's the space I'm in at the moment. But I do think it is fundamental. I think I know I produce better work when I'm having fun, when I work with people that I feel I'm having fun with. I think I perform better.
Just to clarify, so having fun is the outcome of play? Are they the one? What do we mean? Is there a difference between play in this definition or having fun?
I don't think so. I think they're, branding of the same word. But I also don't think you have to pick whether mental health or fun is at the centerpiece, because they're the same thing in my head. Like, having fun is a component of mental health, like mental health or well-being, and I'm going to try and not get too sciencey on you, but there are components of types of happiness, and there's like eudaimonic happiness, which is that value, that purpose, that I'm contributing, and then there's the hedonic happiness, which is the satisfaction, the joy, the having a laugh. And we don't get psychological well-being with one or the other. We need both, so you don't have to choose. It's about
excellent.
Yeah, there you go. Win. So I think it's like everything in life. We try to simplify things, and we want a system and a framework because it makes us feel really safe. But there's very little in life that is that binary of this or that. And exactly as you mentioned with the lifetime and how we shift and we shape, there will be times when we need a little bit more on the play and a little bit less on the purpose. And there'll be times when we need a little bit more on the purpose and a little bit less on the play. And there'll be times when we need to be a bit more socially connected, and other times we need a little bit more isolation and a little bit more quiet time. And we need to be okay with the messy space in between where we've got the balance wrong and we feel all wrong. And then we're going to just readjust, because balance isn't about always being really stable. It's about wobbling a bit to the left and wobbling a bit to the right, but generally trying to find a middle path. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I was on a panel today, and someone put the concept of, rather than talk about work-life balance, talk about work-life flow, because we move from bits of the different parts of balance from time to time. And I think, purpose, play, meaning, all forms part of that.
Thank you. Now, I love it when a panel gives an audience some ideas just to try. So, on the subject of being more playful, now, this isn't instead of being purposeful, but, while living your purposeful life or doing whatever it is you do, what top tips have we got to share on just being more playful at the same time? Or does it need to be separate?
I don't think it needs to be separate. I'm going to ask the audience to think about a challenge, something you're finding it hard to motivate yourself to do, or something to do. So a question, I was asked yesterday they were like, oh, I'm finding that I'm trying to take, was it yesterday? No, it was last week. But I know I need to take more breaks, but now I'm being hard on myself because I don't take enough breaks and I'm always working and I'm never stopping and blah, blah, blah. And I said to the person, well, you need to make it more fun. So we organised that within their team, everyone says, right, I'll take a break, and whoever doesn't take a break in the day has to buy dinner for everyone else in the team. So we turned something that was supposedly good for us but had become a big to-do, we turned it into a game. So someone from the audience, something that you're struggling to get yourself to do, something you're finding it hard to motivate yourself to do. Anyway. Wake up early. Okay. So then we could look at that and we could say, right, how do we turn that into a game? Right. What's something you love doing? I really could get myself in a bit of a mess here. What's something you love doing? Hula hooping. Okay. Tomorrow morning, when you get out of bed, I would like you to hula hoop for 5 minutes. Challenge accepted. Okay. And then tomorrow you have to post in the chat from where it's posted on is it on YouTube? It's going to be posted. I'd like you to post whether you actually got out of bed and hula hooped. Okay, there we go. Let's see how that goes.
And then assuming that goes to plan, how many hula hoops have you got? Well, how many have you got? You've got, they're not very expensive. I'm just feeling a hula hooping teaching. I've never been able to do it. So, Freddie, if you could put that on the programme. Who else would fancy coming and having a go at some hula hooping? Yeah? Networking whilst hula hooping. I mean, I can't believe nobody's had that idea before.
There we go. Trademark that. Hula network.
Yeah, Hula network, absolutely. Rob, what about you? What would your advice or brilliant idea or thing to try be?
So I think we need to be a bit more playful, or at least more curious about our own mental health and well-being. So a little exercise for you now based on the whole concept of form score. So I'm going to tell you how I am today. I'm a 6 out of 10, which is average form. And the reason I'm a 6 out of 10 is because I'm feeling a bit low. I'm not able to exercise, so I've got some challenges of long COVID. I'm feeling pretty, energized and up for being here. I've had some very good connections today. I'm all right about my financial well-being right now, but I know many will be concerned about that. I do have a strong sense of purpose, and I'm living that. And I'm balancing stress with moments of recovery pretty well. So what I'd invite you to do is just think, what is your score out of 10, where 6 is average, 8 is very good, 10 is your peak form, and then 5 is low, 4 is very low, 3, 2, 1 is really struggling, okay? So think what your score is, and then I'd invite you just for a minute to turn to the person next to you and share what your score is, but also what's driving it. Share as much or as little as you're comfortable doing. Go. And for those that are watching at home, again, just do this exercise with a friend or a loved one, after you finish the webinar, or if you've got someone there now. People share it's a wonderful other thing. Okay. Thank you. So look, just quickly. Thank you. So basically, I asked you to discuss your mental health there. And what I saw, and I'm still seeing, are smiles, eye contact, laughter, just by being a little bit vulnerable, a bit curious, and sharing. A real simple exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. What about you, Michelle? Anything to get our audience to try, or any top tips to share?
Well, I was wondering about this for myself, so I'm going to ask you to wonder it about yourselves. I'm not sure it's a tip. look after yourself when I ask this question, but when did you last play and what did you do? And just sit here just for a moment. Let's just be comfortable with the silence. 10 seconds.
And
Just
if you want
hold
to
it.
share,
Just hold it for a sec. And now, if you feel comfortable, turn and talk to your neighbour. When did you last play and what did you do?
I would say when I swim, it's a bit close to meditation. But yeah, I love to play games. So I played cornhole yesterday. Oh my God. Do you know?
Mine would be, I do cold water therapy. Yeah. So I do, because it's quite self-indulgent, it's therapeutic, it's out in nature, it's like a so I was there this morning. Required. So I would turn that as
Do you know, Michelle, once again, I'm seeing lots and lots of smiling faces, which is good, right?
It was quite interesting. We were... Hi, everyone. Oh. It's nice, isn't it, when there's a little bubble of conversation. That's what it's all about. Sorry, I didn't get your name, but we were having a chat, weren't we? Sorry. Pip. So Pip and I were talking about how we, if you don't mind me saying, we both find it quite hard to think when did we last play. But Pip was talking about reading and we were using the words nourishing, and then we were also using the word pleasure. And then that made me think, pleasure and play. Are they the same? Are they buddies?
I'd say they're definitely good friends. Yeah, I would say so.
You're all right then.
But also, one person's idea of fun is very different to another's. So tell the audience what you were describing as your self-indulgent bit of fun.
So I've got into kind of cold water therapy. It helps with the long COVID, but I've got this kind of tank, this well in my garden. So I've been doing it all through the winter and it's a bit warm now. But this morning I got in there, the sun was shining, the birds were tweeting away, and I spent 10 minutes in this very cold water, just kind of enjoying the buzz and enjoying the feeling of being outside. And it was a very mindful moment. So I would term that as play for sure.
And builds huge admiration from me. And anybody else, please raise your hand if it sounds like your idea of fun. Right, you've got a few guests joining you tomorrow morning.
I'm going to be turning up at your house to get in your tank.
There's room for two.
Because I just do it in the shower, it doesn't work. That sounds really wrong.
That's a whole different kind of fun. But I guess where we're moving with this is, again, it's personal, right? We're all different.
But I think that's the thing with a well-being journey, that it is really individual, and workplaces struggle with well-being provision because how can you cater for thousands of people in a workplace? At an individual level, we've got to go on this voyage of self-discovery, and a lot of it is trial and error where our wellness is concerned, because we're not taught, to your point earlier, we're not taught how to look after our well-being. I
think we're also sometimes not told to trust, because we read online that this is supposed to be really good for us and we keep doing it and we're like, isn't this supposed to be making me feel good? And it maybe doesn't. And I think that's a real challenge, that we think we're supposed to fit into some box of whatever that is. I mean, we've got to trust ourselves a little bit more and play a bit more at finding what it is that helps us feel good.
I'm going to be careful where we go with this one, just after the cold water tank and for two. But do you think we experiment enough?
I don't think so. I think we like to play it safe. A lot of people. I'm not going to say everyone. I'm sure there are some people. But I think sometimes we can take us well. And you asked me earlier, you know, when my book is written, what's going to be the takeaway message? I would say the takeaway message of my book is going to be, let's stop taking ourselves too seriously. Let's experiment, play, get curious, do different stuff, because it's where we exceed our wildest expectations.
Okay, and here's something we've never done before at The Conduit, to my knowledge. So if Charlotte goes ahead and publishes that book, who's interested in reading a copy? I think it's a goer.
Hey, there we go.
It's a goer.
Let's do that. So now we need to say to the Conduit Club, are you going to sponsor the book?
I think we've got some willing volunteers for some experiments, including hula hooping. Now, very shortly, we're going to turn to our audience. Thank you, Freddie. And so be ready with your questions. But before we do, you were just about to interject there, Rob, so while they're composing themselves.
I was thinking that we also really need to cover, you know, the detrimental effects of being highly purposeful and how that can really drive us. And you, Michelle, have spoken about burnout. And I need to be very intentional about making sure I connect with my children, that I, you know, get into my well, that I get on my record decks and do the things that I like to do, because I'm really driven about what I'm trying to achieve. And I think sometimes that strong sense of purpose can take away from our recovery, our ability to rest, and our ability to play. And I'm keen to hear some perspectives on that.
So is that you moving away from your purpose-driven career? So moving away from purpose, or what you're saying is you take your purpose and you, like a piece of pie, have different bits of purpose and different pots.
Well, I think purpose can drive you, and I think, speaking for myself, it can drive me to extremity, because I really want to achieve this thing that I've set out to do. And I think a lot of us that have got that you know, purpose-driven, meaningful activity in our lives, that we can be very, very driven. And I think sometimes that can be at the detriment of our health, particularly as social entrepreneurs or whatever we might be. And I think we've got to be very intentional about that work-life flow, that balance, to make sure we're getting recovery, we're getting play alongside what is driving us from a sense of purpose.
I feel the need for somebody really intelligent to do a big, long mathematical equation along a whiteboard somewhere that shows, you know, you are far more likely to make the impossible possible by taking a sustainable and well-managed personal approach to purpose. Yeah. Is that too long for a book title?
It'd be a good formula, wouldn't it? But I think you're right, though, because actually, you've got to put more in the tank to give you the reserves to handle what you're choosing to do.
Yeah.
And you know, resilience is a much misused term, but it's a flexibility and adaptability, and you get that by topping your battery up or building a bigger battery. And you're not going to do that if you're continually draining that battery, right?
Yeah, no, I get you. I think we should ask Michelle before we go to questions. So you've written the book on this, literally. What's your take on it?
Well, firstly, I feel like in this room we should acknowledge privilege within this conversation, shouldn't we? Because it is so important for us to be talking about how it's critical to look after our mental health and our well-being. And you know, what are the pleasurable things that we can do? What are the nourishing things that we can do? But not everyone can. And I think it's important. I just feel like I could give lots of examples of things that we could and should be doing. And, you know, I could do them, and they're pretty nice things, and I do make time for them. And I need to acknowledge that the truth is not everyone can just go and make some sourdough bread, because making stuff is playful and an innate need in us as human beings. So it's important to say that. That said, one of the things that I created when I was being asked a lot, well, what do you do to look after your mental health, Michelle? What do you do now? And I am very much a work in progress. Just before I finished writing the book, I got a diagnosis of ADHD at the age of 49, which has been like a revelation to understanding myself. But I created 6 prompts that I call the M plan. It's in the book. And it can be the Michelle plan, the mental health plan, the me plan, which means that you can all use the M plan. But it starts with a question that I find one of the most useful questions in life. And I find it quite difficult to remember the prompts, but this is what is needed. So, yeah, every day there will be a moment. It might be in a conversation, it might be to do with how I'm feeling, and I will say what is needed. And then I have 6 prompts. Move, meditate, make, meet, meaning, and mindset. And that's not the whole list of what is going to look after my mental health, but I do find that I am the sort of person that needs some prompts, and probably play is often going to be serviced by some of those M's that I am not naturally weaving into my day-to-day life. So then that bigger question, what is needed? And I can use that if I'm offering someone help. What is needed here? Maybe we're just talking about silence. Maybe just some quiet. That's what is needed. In the workplace, if someone's struggling, what is needed? Can we make some changes? Do we just need to listen? You know, that question for me, and having some easy to remember prompts, helps how I am wired. It won't necessarily help everyone.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful audience, your turn. I don't know if we need a mic. We do. Okay,
Hi.
yes. Give us your name and where you're directing your question to.
I'm Sarah, and thank you so much for the really lovely conversation. I just had a little bit of a different question. Could you all kind of give recommendations on how do you navigate saying you need play? I mean, especially if you're earlier in your career, like I am, I'm not in a position where I can say, oh, there's a team, we're going to implement this in the same way, and saying, actually I need to step back and navigating maybe the judgment that exists, if you have any recommendations.
I was going to try and understand a bit more in what sense you're having to say that. Is it that someone's asking you to do something and you need to, I don't know, boundary some time for it? Or is it that you want to bring it into your workplace and you want to put forward a proposal to management to bring this into your workplace?
I just mean the day-to-day, it's like, okay, I need to take a break. But,
Okay.
Even in just the middle of your day, I need to, have a little play to get through the rest of the day. But how do you deal with, oh, you need a break, all of that.
Yeah. I think there's 2 sides. For me, from my experience of this, sometimes we can imagine what other people are thinking when maybe they aren't thinking it. And so there's that challenge. But it sounds like this is something where you're pretty sure that this is the way people are thinking. And yeah, so this isn't just your own internal diner. It's communicated quite clearly. Yeah, it's not just well, I think there's an element of having a conversation with whoever it is in that organization that you think would be most useful to have that chat with about how you perform at your best, and how having boundary time is what enables that, and have that conversation with them, because that is what is going to help you to perform at your best. And I think if we can have those conversations with people, now I understand that from a psychological safety perspective, not everybody is able to have that conversation with their boss or with their mentor. So finding someone you can initially have that conversation with. I often come back to the stats for people because that's helpful when I'm coming in at my level. But if you come in at that within a business, it sometimes gets kicked back if people get a bit defensive. But just asking that person how you can make it work. Like, I need this time to work to my best potential. I appreciate that doesn't work with the way our diaries are working. How do you suggest, as my leader, boss, whatever, that we find a balance so that I can be doing my best work, I can be getting the best out of myself, so that you get the best out of me too. So it becomes a bit more throwing it back at them rather than you saying, this is what I need and this is what I need. Does that make sense? Yeah, does it sound like it's even realistic?
I guess we'll find out.
Okay. Drop me an email. I'm happy to give you a free coaching call to help you through that. So drop me an email. Okay.
That's really nice of you. Thank you. And it's quite sad, right?
I've just got her fired.
So, well,
let's face it.
Or her boss. Because I'm sitting here going, the role of every leader is to work with the individual to optimize the impact, productivity, value from each asset within the business, right? That's the role of a leader, isn't it? You know, and the fact you're taking personal responsibility to even think about and to manage what you need to optimize that personal productivity is exactly what I would be looking for in a team member. So
I'll just give you context. I'm studying law at the master's level, so it's not
But it's something you're going to have to deal with when you get into work, right?
Yeah.
I lived with a lawyer for many years, yes. It's a difficult one.
who's next?
Thank you. Thinking about when you talked about culture earlier, I thought that was really interesting. I really enjoyed the conversation around how we manage it in like the work-life flow. I like the word integration when I describe it, but flow sounds really cool. Going back to the idea of culture, I would kind of describe culture as a feeling. All of you kind of touched on the fact it's quite hard to pin down, but what would be your advice to leaders or colleagues to make a culture that feels better in the workplace?
Go on, Rob. This one's got your name all over it.
Yeah, so for leaders, I think it's around creating a level of openness, creating a level of vulnerability, authenticity, and you know, if you really want a healthy organisation, as a leader, you have to give permission for people in that organisation to do the things to prioritise your well-being, to take that extra time to do it, to recover, and so. To create that culture, you need leaders who are talking about it. You need leaders who are saying, actually, the well-being and the health of our people, who, by the way, we say are our greatest assets, is of a strategic priority to the organisation, alongside the other purpose of that organisation, which would typically be return of shareholder value. So leaders need to state that. They need to walk the walk. Leaders also need to role model healthy behaviours. So, if you've got a leader that's saying, we prioritise well-being, but they never take their holidays and they're sending emails at 11 p.m. every night, what sort of message does that send? So they've got to walk the walk, even if it's uncomfortable for the leader. And then I think that's the role of leaders. I think within our teams then, and at all levels in our organisations, we need to be talking about well-being. We need to be talking about doing the things that keep us well. We need to be bringing play into our teams, into the way that we're working. And I think we've all got a responsibility to do that, because we're all role models and we're all part of that culture, part of forming that culture. So that would be my few thoughts on that.
Thank you. Michelle, anything to chip in on that one?
I think it's probably a build on all the good things that have been said. But if I think back to when we started Liberty in 2001, and I described the young people that were knocking at the door and coming in and sitting at the desks and giving us those deeper insights, which meant that our work was better, but also that sense of fun and play and purpose was stronger as well. We very quickly, in the year 2001, coined the phrase co-creation and described that as we put our audience at the centre of our business. We put our audience at the centre of creating the solutions, having the ideas, or collaborating with them, or mentoring them to do things that would then benefit them first and foremost. Didn't always get it right, but that was the intention. But that would also benefit our business and therefore benefit our clients. And our clients were Google and Facebook and Unilever, and taking those businesses on a journey so then they could start saying they were purpose-led businesses. Again, another part of the conversation. Are they?
Yeah, I think that's really important, both sort of just to pick up on a couple of those points. I think that idea of bringing your team in to that conversation. So not making leaders, this is how we're going to make a good culture, have a conversation with team members. And there's a model called the appreciative inquiry approach to doing that. It's relatively easy to do a training in that. So if you wanted to bring it into your organization, you could do that training. Again, like I can send you information on different people who do that. And also just coming back to what Rob said about our leaders role modeling, 96% of leaders burn out at some point in their career, which is a very much higher percentage than the general population of employees. And it's not only that those then are sending the messages of, oh, it's okay to work all hours of day. When you're tired, stressed, exhausted, burning out, you don't listen carefully. You don't communicate. You are snappy. You do. So we have to understand that if we want to create a positive culture, leaders need to invest time in looking after themselves. And a number of times I get brought into companies to do a 1-hour workshop to get leaders to look after themselves. It's not going to change. And more now I'm being asked to do offsites and retreats and events where we can get leaders out and, just like Rob said, help them to understand the importance of looking after themselves, getting enough sleep, understanding their strengths, playing to their strengths, all of that piece. So I think if there is a cultural issue, we have to say, is that because leaders are burning out and leaders are stressed, and we need to, number one, help them look after themselves?
I totally agree with that. And I had a personal experience at my previous career where I was that leader and conscious you're not doing your best, conscious you've got all the pressure and there's a lot going on. And actually, I was really, really lucky. I had, 2 senior members of my team who, instead of doing you've got a problem, what are you going to do about it, which is easily done, or you're doing this and I don't think it's good for the organization, did, how can we help you? Because we can see you're not at your best. You can't be at your best because this is what's happening. Here are some ideas. Here's where we think you could delegate more. And that for me was probably one of the biggest learning points in my own leadership journey. So, for those of you who aren't the leader, think about how you can lead without being the person in charge, how you can help drive that culture of mutual support, because you're right, the leaders need as much support as any of us.
Can I just quickly build on that as well? Just, again, to shout out any leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners, I'd say freelancers as well in that category, and I'm sure I've missed someone out. But as Rob said, the theme of Mental Health Awareness Week this week is loneliness. And loneliness looks like different things to different people. And I can tell you that leadership can be incredibly lonely. And I think that is something that we also need to address. I think mental health is a leadership issue, without a doubt. Co-creation, definitely. Just please make sure that it involves you all, including the leader. That's well, we're going to do some co-creation. So you guys do that over there, and then let me know. No, the leader's got to be involved in it. That's where the role modeling happens. But it is often incredibly lonely being a leader.
Okay, thank you. And you're right. We've got time for one more question.
Okay, great. Hi, thanks so much. I have a question
What's
about...
your name?
Oh, my name's Elise.
Elise.
Yeah, I've got a question that relates to burnout. I have burned out myself. I've been to the depths and back, and I think the other end of burnout is what we've talked about today is flow. I think, Rob, you described that, and personally, I've found that space, which is really exciting. But here's my question for you. I think I heard that all of you have burned out. I'm sure a lot of people in this room have too, and I have too, yet I'm still not convinced that won't happen to me again. And I'm curious, is that something that is common, to think that it's possible to get there again when sometimes you do feel like you're saving the world or trying to? And if so, do you have any advice on what the triggers or kind of gates or moments would be where you would catch it? Because the line keeps moving, at least in my own experience. And I could sit here now and I could say, oh, it won't happen to me again, but I'm not totally sure that's true. So I'm curious your thoughts.
It's a really good question, and there are a bunch of symptoms of early stage burnout. I probably won't remember them all, but things like feelings of detachment, difficulty concentrating, susceptibility to illness. There's about 8 or 9 of them. You can look them up. But for me, I know personally, if I find it difficult to think creatively, I'm pushing myself too hard, because that's the first thing that goes. And so I've never really experienced a full burnout, but I know if I'm doing too much, that if I can't think of simple creative solutions, I probably need to back off and go for a bike ride or go to sleep or do something. So I think it's having that self-awareness of what are the triggers that are personal to you and what are the signs that are personal to you, and check in with yourself. That exercise I did earlier with, how am I today? You can build that in and think, okay, what are my signs of burnout today? Are they present? Do I need to take a long weekend? Do I need to take a weekend, or whatever it might be? And I think that self-awareness can be helpful.
I would say that the self-awareness is you're 90% of the way there. You really are, because it's knowing that we do remain vulnerable forever. I mean, how many people who believe they've experienced some degree of burnout? And it is a scale, so some degree of burnout. Okay, and just keep your hands raised if you are also think that there might be a risk of you burning out again, or if you think you totally nailed it. Okay, so you're not alone, right? It's a real fear, because we're all aware of that potential tendency. But if I can just call on my last study that was published, it actually identified that most people who go through a burnout experience something called post-traumatic growth. And that is that as a result of their burnout, they end up with a higher level of functioning and a higher level of resilience. So you're much better off now than you were before. And every time you have a dip and you go, oh, is that edge? Oh, you're going to get a bit stronger, and you're going to get a bit stronger, and you're going to get a bit stronger. And you just create a collection of people around you who you give permission to say, call me out if this happens, or if I do that, or if you notice this. And you just remain self-aware. And unfortunately, can't give you the magic pill to avoid it. But if you're self-aware, you're 90% of the way there.
Do you know? Yeah. I was going to ask each of our panel here to just give us one thought to leave us with as we close, but can we take that as yours, because that was truly brilliant. You get away without having to do that again. Thank you. What about you guys? If you want these guys to take away one thing, what would it be?
So I would say make time for your wellness, and that can include play, but make time for your wellness, because otherwise illness will force you to make time for it.
Thanks, Rob. Michelle?
Just remember, your mental health is not fixed. And for me, I have my daily disciplines, my daily do's, my daily don'ts. So it comes back to awareness, but I have to put some structure and prompts into that sense of awareness, because I find it harder to take action if I don't know what those daily disciplines in my life are. And then forgiveness when you don't do them. There's always tomorrow.
Can I make one more observation?
Yes, you may.
On a lighter note, it seems that all the microphones in the conduit, they're battered, right? They're all dented. There must be so many mic drop moments here.
Mine isn't.
Well, no, I think you've got the only perfectly formed round thing.
I thought that was a design.
Before we invite you all to continue to chat and network up on the third floor, I do want to finish where we started today, which is to make you choose black or white in a subject that is clearly completely shades of grey. But if you did have to choose the answer of today's session, which is more important, purpose or play, who would choose purpose? And who would choose play? Interesting. Sorry? Yes. Okay, I'm going to change it. So I'm going to go for a unanimous vote here. Who thinks it's possible to find purpose and play in your purpose? There you go. That was a majority, not unanimous vote. But for now, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for joining at home. For those of you in your building, please do come and join us on the 3rd floor. And if any of you here tonight are guests and you would like a tour of the building or to talk to anybody about membership, then please do grab hold of one of the Conduit team, and it would be our absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And a huge round of applause for our panel.